So I too have lived in Elwood, and one of my more repeatable obsessions is that the Blues Brothers were called Jake and Elwood. Who they were named after, I'm not sure. So machine learning, statistics, econometrics, inductive inference, data mining, data science, knowledge discovery are all partly synonymous terms for what we want to do with data in finding patterns. So thank you to Graham for the invitation. Thank you to Graham and Armin for the organisation. Thank you to the other speakers. Thank you for those present and anyone listening subsequently. So we've been introduced well to information, well to entropy. I'm going to mention a statistical term, likelihood, and a term from both statistics and machine learning, message length. I'm also going to endeavour to mention some Australian connections. So it was, I think it was Armin who talked about the Huffman code. So if we have, I think Armin gave the example of 10 probabilities, all being 0.1. I'm going to take 4 probabilities and I'm going to make the numbers quite friendly to me. So half, a quarter, an eighth and an eighth, to the power of -1, to the power of -2, to the power of -3, to the power of -3. Here are the codes. The codes have what's called a prefix property. None of these code words is a prefix of any other code word. That's a really handy thing because when you're sending a message, you can automatically pick off the code word. So if I can choose 4 people to randomly give me a 0 or a 1. A 0 or a 1, please. Like 1? Just say 0 or 1, please. 1. 1. So 0, 1, 0, 1, 1, 1. Okay, so I read off here 0. Immediately it's that, and it can't have been anything else. Now that that's gone, 1, 1, 1. And I've never met any of these people before. Actually that's not true. And as the string goes on, now if the 5th bit had been a 1, I don't really know what's going to come, but certainly what follows I'm going to be able to uniquely decode when I get to the end of the code word. And here are the code lengths. Now, the logarithm of the product is the sum of the logarithms. And that's very related to this idea of the notion of information. So let us now continue. So refer to all my cheat sheets when they don't fall over. So in statistics, they talk about the likelihood. Now, unlike Claude Shannon's thesis as presented by Jonathan Keith, I think I got my subscript wrong there. That's meant to be an I. So basically, all I'm saying here is the probability of some data given a model, assuming these data are independent of one another, is the product of each datum times the model, the probability of the datum times the model. Now, the logarithm of the product is the sum of the logarithms. So I can do what statisticians do. I can say, I'm interested in doing something with this likelihood function, such as maximising it. Well, why don't I, instead of playing with this mammoth probability and its product, why don't I take logarithms? Instead of maximising the product, I'm going to maximise its logarithm. And by convention, statisticians take the negative logarithm, which corresponds to the Shannon information. And there's a statistical approach called maximum likelihood, quite popular, which advocates choosing the model which maximises this. And there are some variations. Sometimes this can overfit, so there are variations. If you've got too many things in your model, if you've got some points and you've got a model that's got all these polynomial terms so that it go through the point, you think, how do I penalise this? And popular approaches for penalising are called the Akaike information criterion and the Bayesian information criterion. These are names used in statistics and machine learning. Okay, so central is the fact the logarithm of the product is the sum of the logarithms. Michael Brand introduced entropy. I've taken a few things here. This is from Wikimedia, and some of the other figures and things I'm using are taken from lecture notes. So here's entropy as our average code length. There's an approach in machine learning called maximum entropy. And the normal distribution, the bell-shaped curve, is the maximum entropy. If you tell me the mean and the standard deviation, then the distribution of maximum entropy is the Gaussian or normal distribution. And that's an approach used in machine learning. Now, another thing that's often done in machine learning is I've got some data and I want to split it. So I might have, here's this data of things in class triangle and things in class circle, possibly not their real names. They could be people with cancer, people without cancer, and we want to find some criterion in which to carve the data up. And we might have various attributes called things like attribute 1, attribute 2, maybe male, female, smoker, non-smoker, whatever. And we think, all right, well, if I divide the data up based on, for example, male, female, perhaps the data ends up like this. Well, it doesn't look like I've done a great job of separating the circle class from the triangle class. If I split on some other attribute, I've got what looks like it might be better, but how do I say? And this one looks pretty good. Now, I've neglected an Australian connection. If I go back here, a big advocate of this was Sir Ronald Aylmer Fisher, a big advocate of the maximum likelihood approach, which still lives on venerably. He wasn't born in Australia, but he's buried in Adelaide. He was working there and no longer is. So here is what looks like a pretty good split. So we won't always get splits that are this pure. How do we know when a split is good or not so good? Well, one way of looking at it is to try to say, all right, I'll look at the entropy measures. So the entropy, as I plotted it, when your split's 50-50, it's at its worst. Whereas when your split's 100% zero, either way, your entropy is really pure. If you go through the mathematics of it, you get that nice curve. So entropy is sometimes used as a criterion for doing these splits. And you'll see this gives you ideal total order entropy, and these, it's hard to, yeah, these aren't so good, that's for sure. This is far better. And Ross Quinlan, another Australian in Sydney, some of his decision tree splitting work was based on using the entropy to decide on when to do the split. So which split is better? Well, hard to know. Perhaps this one on the right, but we can use entropy as a criterion. So if he had different things he could split on, male, female versus smoker, non-smoker, etc., in his work he could say, all right, let's use the entropy. Now, this raises another issue. I talked before about when you had maximum likelihood, you sometimes might have too many parameters, and how do you get rid of them? And there's the Akaike information criterion, the Bayesian information criterion, and other approaches. Similarly, when you're growing a decision tree, if I have a million different things I could split on, then of course there's almost certainly going to be one that's going to enable me a really pure split. So how do I avoid overfitting in cases like that? And I can appeal to the Shannon notion of information again. Let's suppose I've got a million, I'll make it 1,048,576 different attributes I could split on. That just happens to be 2 to the power of 20. So I could say, all right, if I want to name which particular attribute I'm splitting on, I have to spend 20 bits of information to say that I'm splitting on attribute 593,222. And does that 20 bits of information get saved in terms of the purity to the data? And the Australian connection is a Monash connection. Chris Wallace, who developed this approach called minimum message length. And we have an Occam's razor. We want a simple model that fits well. So maximum likelihood, we want short Shannon information in the data. We can also cost the model complexity. And yeah, it's kind of like file compression. If there's structure, you should be able to compress it. that's about all I have time for. Thank you very much for your attention.